My name is Moray. I'm a fashion designer who absolutely loves history, and my dream is to make a film one day. I'm doing a series where I talk about some of the most famous rulers in history and the partners that got them there. And today we're going to be covering the Severan Dynasty. It's a very long video, so grab a cup of tea, but we're going to be covering the two Julias from the Severan Dynasty. The two Julias got 5 emperors to the throne, and that is a really impressive feat, considering how wonderful and psychopathic some of the men we're going to be discussing are today. The Severan Dynasty, who came into power from 193 AD to 235 AD, came into power at a time where ancient Rome was having mass civil wars and was at turmoil, and they brought stability along with it. The founder of this dynasty was Septimius Severus, who was a Roman general and who had worked quite hard to get into the ranks of emperor. He was an emperor that brought along family values. He liked Augustan values, which is something we're going to be discussing in this video. And he married Julia Domna, who was a Syrian aristocrat that got 3 of her men to the throne. Septimius Severus' sons, Caracalla and Geta, who will be featured in the Gladiator film as the main villains, had a bit of a tumultuous reign. Once they fell from the throne, we see Julia Maesa, Julia Domna's sister, who gets her grandchildren, Elagabalus and Severus Alexander, to the throne. However, Elagabalus is awful. Severus Alexander had a better run. But what is remarkable is that these two sisters got 5 of their men to the throne, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Julia Domna was born in 160 AD, and Julia Maesa is born just before 160 AD. Ancient Roman naming practices were a lot different to how they are today. Their first name comes from their father Julius. Their names are Julia. It's just how the Roman naming system was back in the day. However, they did have different cognomens, so different last names to differentiate the sisters. Me, like an idiot, when learning about Julia Domna's name, thought that her name was Julia Domna because she got 3 men to the throne and she was a domina. But it turns out Domna means black in Arabic because the family are from Syria. However, Julia Maesa, Elagabalus and Severus Alexander's grandmother, cognomen Maesa, it means in Arabic to have something to do with a swinging gate. Let's talk about the sisters' fathers, Julius Bassianus. Julius Bassianus was likely born in the 150s or 160s in modern-day Homs in Syria. He was a high priest at the temple of Elagabalus. Julius Bassianus was also very rich. Priests were very, very rich. He had noble social standing and riches, and the Bassianus family belonged to local Arab nobility. I want to discuss about how Julia Domna found her husband through her father Julius Bassianus, and this is quite a romantic story depending on the context of how you think about it. Septimius Severus at the time was a rising Roman general. He was not bound to wear the purple. However, he hears an omen that he is due to meet his future wife, who is prophesied to marry a king. And obviously he goes to a priest to find out where he can find this wife. Well, the priest was Julia Domna's father, Julius Bassianus. And Julia Domna and Septimius Severus became engaged and got married in modern-day Lyon in France. Their union was fruitful, it was loving. 2 sons came along. I also want to mention as well, if we are going to be talking about partners, wives, Julia Domna was not Septimius Severus's first wife. He was actually a widower. He was married to a woman, Passia Marciana. However, she died of natural causes and illness. It's also interesting that the Historia Augusta talks about how Passia and Septimius had 2 children, but no Where are they to be found? In anywhere other than the Historia Augusta, and that proves how fake the Historia Augusta is, but it's one of the only sources we have for ancient Rome, so we love it anyway. Let's discuss Septimius Severus's career. Septimius Severus is born on April the 11th in 145 AD. He comes from a good rank of citizen. He comes from an equestrian rank. Septimius comes from Libyan origin and Roman origin. This is a tidbit that I really love. In 162 AD, Septimius Severus starts his career. And who is the one who he is working under? Well, it's none other than my personal favourite, Daddy Marcus Aurelius. And him and Aurelius, in the sources I've read, are purported to be quite close. Now we're going to discuss what happened when Marcus Aurelius' son, Commodus, gets assassinated and how Septimius takes the reins. Commodus obviously has a predecessor, Pertinax. However, troops end up murdering him, and Septimius, who is a high general in the army, takes his revenge against those who murder Pertinax. This creates a power vacuum, and in 193 AD we have Septimius Severus start the Severan Dynasty and fulfill his destiny of becoming an emperor because he married Julia Domna, who was alleged to be the queen of an emperor. We are going to start speaking about their sons Caracalla and Geta, and how Julia Domna's strengths came out as an empress, but also as a mother during this time. A huge proponent of Septimius Severus, his rule was to show Augustan values, right? So we go to the start of the empire, and he really wanted traditional values to flourish in the empire after a time of like Commodus, who just a really unpleasant guy. Julia Domna was the perfect Roman woman to showcase these values. She became a symbol of mothers and wives, and she actually played a huge role in modern day life in Rome, in public life, which is something we don't see that often. She was active in ceremonies in regards to the Vestal Virgins, and she's taking part in a lot of banquets to do with Juno and Diana. We can see this from coins. Also, Septimius had to legitimize his reign one way, so he went on a lot of campaigns, and this meant that Julia Domna became Mater Castorium. This is an honour that, to be honest, is given out quite a lot. I think around 13 empresses have got the Mater Castorium, the mother of the camp title. However, what makes Julia Domna special is that she was a philosopher. Domna was interested in Pythagoreans, and she commissioned a book from Philostratus. So Septimius Severus appoints his son Caracalla, not his real name, age 9, to become joint Augustus. Severus, as I've mentioned, who was a colleague of Marcus Aurelius, needed to carry on legitimizing his rule and name his son after someone who was highly valued in Roman society. The name we know him now as Caracalla is a Celtic cloak that Caracalla constantly wore. We don't know him as Marcus Aurelius. When we discuss Caracalla and Geta, Geta did not get the same honours as his older brother. Caracalla was the heir and Geta was the spare. This meant that Julia Domna had a lot on her plate. From their teenage years, they were fighting.
I think I need these to...
There. 1 second.
Last chance to surrender!
Go right ahead, fat hands.
Geta did not see his own inferiority. He saw himself at the same rank as Caracalla. Geta was the one left behind, but Geta did not see it as that way. Severus decides to take his family on campaign to Britain to go kill some Celts, and Geta and Caracalla's rivalry grows even stronger. While Caracalla was ordered to commander troops, Geta was given civilian authority, so he was given paperwork. That's quite a big difference. What's even more devastating is that Geta was given the title Augustus a decade after his brother, and this meant that Geta missed out on a lot of duties. I don't know why Septimius loved Caracalla so much. Because, spoiler alert, but if Geta wasn't killed, I think he'd be the better emperor than Caracalla. Geta's high opinion of himself did nothing to quell Caracalla's hatred towards his brother, so Caracalla's like, let's get him. And what's worse is Septimius Severus' health keeps on getting worse. He had pleas for his sons to get along with each other, knowing that they were going to handle this empire that Septimius was slowly invigorating. Severus dies on the 24th of February in 211 AD. Caracalla is 22 years old and Geta is 21 years old, prime age for ruling and fighting. The Roman world now had two brothers as joint emperors in a situation which was going to get worse and worse. They just would not get on. Julia Domna was trying so hard to handle her fighting sons. What's also interesting is that Caracalla was named after Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, who had the co-ruler Lucius Verus, but Lucius Verus died, so he couldn't co-rule properly with Marcus Aurelius. But Septimius saw this model, this family model, and hoped his sons would follow that the Marcus Aurelius and Verus situation, but they did not. Geta did not behave like Lucius Verus and let Marcus Aurelius, who was the elder one, do all the duties. Appointments, the brothers would bicker and fight with each other, and nothing was being done in the empire. In fact, the Senate was so disturbed with how the brothers were fighting, they wanted to divide the empire in two just so the brothers could be away from each other. In 211, there is a turbulent period, and everything comes to a head. Caracalla was done. The situation had broken down, it had become unbearable. Caracalla decides to have his brother unsuccessfully killed at Saturnalia celebrations, and then when that did not work out, he agrees with his mother to hold a peace meeting at her apartments and decides, you know what, I'm just gonna stab my brother at this peace meeting, and Geta dies in his mother Julia Domna's arms. This is what Cassius Dio has to say about the situation. She might neither mourn nor weep for her son. On the contrary, she was compelled to rejoice and laugh, as though enjoying some great piece of luck. All her words, gestures, and changes of colour were watched with the utmost narrowness. She alone, Augusta, wife of the emperor, mother of emperors, was not permitted to shed tears in private over such a great calamity. And this talks about how a woman so upset about this death of her son was not allowed to weep in public. She had to hold the status quo and had to try and hold the family together. And she had to silently mourn for her son. If she had displayed any sign of grief, Caracalla could have had her killed. So she had to hold it together. However, we have seen that despite her younger son being killed, by this point, Julia Domna has gotten two men successfully to the throne, just as she was destined to. Actually, she was destined to only get one, but here she is. By this point, Julia Domna knows that for her survival, she's got to get the reins in on Caracalla, who is becoming like Nero. People do not like Caracalla, and a civil war could easily erupt back in Rome. What Julia Domna did not know is that under looking after her son, her influence and greatness were going to grow even stronger. Even when at war, he had all of his correspondence addressed to his mother so he would not be distracted. He even had his letters to include his mother's name to show how much he respected her. Caracalla was not a good emperor. He was especially irresponsible with money, despite his mother trying to warn him. And he was very good at ignoring her advice, despite the fact he respected her. So therefore, it is no surprise that Caracalla gets assassinated in 217 AD while urinating on the side of a road. And thus, Julia Domna's three sons, who ruled the empire with various degrees of greatness, had ended. It's purported that Julia Domna starved herself to death, but people actually say that she had breast cancer. However, whilst her story had ended, it lent itself to her sister getting her grandchildren into power. Now we're going to be discussing Julia Maesa. She is the grandmother of Elagabalus and Severus Alexander, and we're going to be sticking to our timeline. This is a very long video, so If you're still with us, then thank you for continuing to watch. Now then, Julia Maesa's life. Julia Maesa was born just before 160 AD, and she was also born in modern day Syria in Emesa. We know his sister, we know her father, and now we're going to discuss what happened when she followed his sister to Rome. Julia's husband was Julius Avitus, and he was not an emperor. Julia Maesa was not destined to marry an emperor or be queen, unlike her sister Julia Domna, but she did take her 2 grandchildren to the throne. Anyway, Julius Avitus. She had 2 daughters with Julius Avitus. Around 180 AD, Julia Maesa gives birth to Julia Soamis. In 182 AD, she gives birth to Julia Mamea. And these 2 women are their mothers of Elagabalus and Severus Alexander. So, as we spoke about briefly in the last video, Emperor Caracalla was assassinated pissing on the side of the road. And obviously this meant that the Severan Dynasty had to be exiled by Macrinus, who was then the emperor after Caracalla was assassinated. You're going to see Macrinus in the newest Gladiator film, played by Denzel Washington, by the way, so I'm excited about that. Macrinus knew that the 2 Julias were deadly, and he needed them quite far away. However, what he didn't know, especially in Julia Maesa's coup, because Julia Domna ended up passing, is that Emesa, modern day Syria, where they had been exiled, was the perfect place to plan a coup. Julia Maesa's time in Emesa restored her desire for the Severan dynasty to be reinvigorated, and she started to scheme to get her grandson Elagabalus on the throne. How this was done? By the creation of a rumour that Caracalla was actually Elagabalus' true birth dad, which means a lot of incest, but the incestuous rumour did end up working. Julia Maesa's forces and Macrinus' forces had a huge battle during the Battle of Antioch, and this led to Macrinus' downfall, and Elagabalus, age 14, wore the purple. Yes, he became an emperor age 14 in 218 AD. However, how would a young teenager rule? We found out through Maria Internet what happened when a young teenager ruled. However, Elagabalus had a bit of a spicier side than Marie Antoinette, I believe. For example, Elagabalus' parties included, well, filling a ceiling full of flowers and drenching your guests so they would smother to death. Elagabalus was all about restoring Syrian religious practices. He wanted to be known as Elagabalus, Heliogabalus, he is also known as, and I apologize if I'm using the wrong pronouns. Historians refer to him as being he, but modern day historians refer to them as a they. So I'm really sorry, I'm not trying to offend any of the LGBT community. Julia Maesa could not control the public's bad reaction to Elagabalus' rule, and the Senate and most of Roman society despised them after their 4 years of reigning. However, Julia Maesa was very clever. She was like her sister Julia Domna, and she maintained a degree of control over the court. And she was concerned for her family's future and understood that Elagabalus needed to go. Literally needed to go. Off he went, and Severus Alexander was now going to be emperor. Severus Alexander's reign was a lot more balanced than his cousin's. In fact, he lasted a lot longer. Severus Alexander actually lasted wearing the purple for about 13 years, so Severus Alexander's reign was in 222 AD to 235 AD. How did Severus Alexander do this? Well, Severus Alexander returned to the traditional values that citizens under the Roman Empire were used to. He started worshipping traditional Roman gods rather than the ones from Oms and Emessus. Severus Alexander also took a trick out of Julia Domna's book, and he allowed his mother Julia Mamea to carry out key administrative duties so he kept on track. Just like Julia Domna did with Caracalla, because Caracalla was a lot more successful with his mother. If he hadn't had his mother, he would have been fucked. Severus Alexander was all about cutting luxuries. He promoted lots of officials, he brought a lot more Praetorian guards, and he had a strong career ahead of him. With that being said, with 2 grandchildren having won the purple and on the throne, Julia Maesa passes away in between 224 AD to 227 AD. We don't quite know. But what a legacy she left for Severus Alexander, right? Wow. I mean, these 2 women alone had managed the careers of 5 emperors. Isn't that crazy? It's a lot more than we usually cover during one of these series. This video was so long. I'm learning how to talk about history, my passion, so much better on film. And this is the longest video I think we've ever done. So if you like these longer videos and made it all the way to the end, then give us a like and tell us what you learned, because I have 2 millennia of history to learn in the next 5 years if I want to go where I want to go with my career. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. We're going to do Alexander the Great. That was a request. And I'm also going to do the Flavians. Man, I love the Flavians, my favorite. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.